You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about the one, the only, the cult classic, Samurai Cop. Here we go. Welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me today, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau, and with us today, Alan, Fan2Fan superstar, hashtag stranger friend. And on this episode, we're talking about the one, the only, the cult classic, Samurai Cop.
Are you Fujiyama?
Yes, I am. Who are you?
I'm a cop.
His real name is Joe Marshall. They call him Samurai. He speaks fluent Japanese. He got his martial arts training from the masters in Japan. Was brought over here from the police force in San Diego to fight us.
Would you like to fuck me?
You're the one that talked me into bringing this moron from San Diego to fight the Japanese katana gang.
Bingo.
I want him dead. I want his head cut off and brought here.
Have you been circumcised?
Yeah, I have. Why?
Well, your doctor must have cut a big portion of it off.
I want his head on this piano so that every man in my organization understands once more that no katana gets captured alive or talks. Got that?
How did you know I'd come home with you?
Let's just say I can read eyes.
I feel like somebody stuck a big club up my ass, and it hurts. I've got to figure out a way to get it out of there.
That's the movie that we're talking about that was originally made in the 90s, but like another movie that, Alan, we talked about in Miami Connection. There's a lot of connective tissues here. We're gonna talk about all of that stuff. But Alan, I'm going to start with you. Had you seen Samurai Cop before?
No, I had not seen Samurai Cop before.
Okay, this is very, very exciting.
It was the first watch for me with Pete and the gang, and my goodness, what a treasure was unearthed. I watched it again to get ready for the podcast. Was equally horrified by the movie again. Just amazing what could be classified as a film.
I love it.
I'm not sure the scientists have weighed in yet if this actually is classified as a film or not. I think it's been under heavy scientific debate for the past 7 or 8 years. So I think we're still waiting for their results. Yeah. I was first made aware of this a couple of years ago and seen it a couple of times since. We'll get into it. I'm curious, knowing that Alan rewatched it again for the podcast, because I thought about doing it. And then I kind of came to the conclusion that movies like this are very difficult for me to watch alone. Like with a group, that's what they're kind of suited for. But I felt like if I were to watch this by myself, might be starting to ask myself some questions about my life that I wasn't ready to tackle or answer. And so I avoided doing that. But maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. How best are these movies to be viewed?
That is a good point, because I remember first time I saw this was the Riff Tracks version. And if folks aren't familiar, it's Mike Nelson, a bunch of the guys that were on Mystery Science Theater. And I think to that point, Pete, some of these movies, the So Bad It's type movies, best watched, best consumed with a group. And maybe there's like another choose your own adventure version where it's like best watched if they're being riffed. If there's like another group of people that maybe virtually aren't sitting in the wood paneled basement with you, but it feels like that. Throwing out all the same jokes that you and your buddies would if you were in that basement watching the same movie.
It's funny because I almost feel like Samurai Cop, more than even others like The Room and Birdemic, it's almost like unriffable. I actually give them credit for even riffing on it, because this movie is so, it's so bad and just off the wall. Like, yeah, I think between the lines and the shots, the quote unquote action,
quote unquote acting too,
the quote unquote acting, right? Yeah, I mean there's just so much to take in with this movie that it's almost like to riff it is like to almost distract you from the chaotic beauty of what you're witnessing on screen.
For sure. I'm glad you brought Birdemic up too, because like this is kind of becoming the group picture with like Troll 2, Birdemic, The Room for sure. and into like that 80s type of production with like New York Ninja and Miami Connection, where it's not just like one person's like auteur singular vision, and all of those movies typically are. But then on top of that, this movie is digging into like all the buddy cop movie tropes, into like the martial arts crates of the 80s. Like Miami is like a hotbed for drug dealers. It's like this big mashup blender of all of those tropes of movies that we grew up on, that we love. The Lethal Weapons, the 48 Hours, the Beverly Hills Cop, all of those, but like very much off-center.
Well, off-centered except for the camera shots in this movie, which are all very much like set, like every character is like literally in the center of the shot. But yeah, I think the other common denominator with all those movies that you mentioned, Bernie, are the auteur being a foreign man that grew up with like this, love of American cinema, comes to the U.S. with the dream of, kind of adding to that pantheon and giving us maybe not what they envisioned, but treasures in their own right. There's that common denominator too. That's like really kind of fascinating when you think about it. I believe the guy that made this was Amir Shaban, who's an Iranian filmmaker. So between that and James Wen did Birdemic, and treasure that is Tommy Wiseau, there's like this trend line of these foreign filmmakers that are produced. I mean, wow.
We had said in the past that if Miami Connection was a movie that was made, in our imaginations while we were kids, and then something like Action USA was done maybe in our teenage minds, then Samurai Cop is probably the early 20s version of that, like going into the 90s. It's so funny because I was watching it today and I was like, wow. So Action USA bases itself fully on the first Lethal Weapon movie. Now, Samurai Cop came out in the early 90s, and it 100% bases itself on Lethal Weapon 2. It literally might steal some of the plot ideas right out from underneath it. There's so much uncomfortable lingering. It's a hot mess. It really does, though. It plays. Pete, you said earlier about like watching it by yourself. When you're watching it by yourself and not with a group, it plays like a movie that's on Skinemax at like 2:00 in the morning.
You heard the order? I do not agree with the fight.
Nakamura, it is not for us to decide. It is up to the boss.
The uncomfortably long, like heavy petting, fairly touching sex scenes make you want to like run away screaming like,
yeah,
is this what someone thinks is sex? Or
yes, I think so.
Someone did. A lot of these movies, like going back to Miami Connection, right? Like YK Kim, he's a Vietnamese immigrant, comes to, literally find the American dream. And, he makes a movie. It doesn't get the reception that he's hoping for, but he's like a Taekwondo, like grandmaster, right? So like, again, the blender of like martial arts, 80s, rock and roll, the whole like Miami scene, the drug dealers, that's Miami Connection, but seen through a guy who grew up in Vietnam, and this is like his interpretation of what like an American action movie should be. A lot of these guys, even James Nunez, who you mentioned, like with Birdemic, there's parts of him that like bring in a little bit of Hitchcock, but he's also like an IT software guy. So of course he would bring in that part of him to bring in the effects, but he's also an environmentalist. So he wants to discuss that stuff. This movie, with the guy growing up, I was reading the Amar Shaban or Shaban. He grew up in California. So obvious that there's like a lot of that stuff, his interpretation of American culture and movies. So this is how people sound. This is how action happens. And meanwhile, we're watching this and being like
a little bit lost in translation, which makes, wild entertainment. I was going to put this question to you guys. I know this movie was one of those lost films that like was found in the early 2000s, and so was never released and kind of first got its life on DVD. But I mean, I feel like this one, like you were saying, Alan, this was like tailor made for like Skinemax. And so it was like, would this have been better having a home on Skinemax or like, the 80s Playboy channel than languishing into obscurity for decades in some warehouse somewhere?
Yeah, I think that the first time we watched it, and my wife Rebecca, who is often on the show, she said it looks like maybe they started out thinking We'll make like a dirty movie. We'll make like a late night sex movie for Skinamax, and then they realized that like the actor they hired had some martial arts skills, and then they tried to take themselves a little more seriously, and they got stuck.
I'll throw in a few little trivia points in here as we talk about it, because I did a little bit of research.
Before you do that, I just want to throw out a disclaimer, because as a good podcast host, I did my homework leading into this episode, because this is such a cult favorite. How many other people have tried to tackle Samurai Cop? And it turns out,
absolutely.
by my count, there are 53 podcast episodes on Samurai Cop alone. So for you listeners out there, what I would say to you, if you're asking, well, what's differentiating this one from those 53 other podcasts out there, I think I can safely say that what will differentiate ours is we're the newest.
They're gonna make the swap somewhere in the marina. Just stick close to them.
Okay, Joe. Keep it up.
Oh, it's up and ready. You just keep it warm.
It's warm and ready.
Yes. So it's early 2000s. It's LA. A storage unit is opened up, and there's a 35 millimeter print that's found. From what I was reading, it likely makes sense. It was a storage unit that was owned by the director. The only reason the article was saying would rationalize there being a fairly crisp 30 millimeter copy of this movie. So it languishes. There's no fanfare for it. There's a DVD release in 2004, but then in 2007, the nurse scene, and we will definitely get into some of these scenes, ends up going viral. Then a distributor, Cinema Epoch, puts it out in 2013, and then it starts like actually picking up some steam. Red Letter Media start throwing out all the GIFs, all the memes, and this movie gets that cult status. Originally made in 90, released in 91, no U.S. official wide release when it came out. I read that like a Polish distributor picked it up strictly to put it on VHS in Poland. It didn't have like a very big life, but the fact that something like this gets made, it gets rediscovered, right? Like it's kind of like, again, the Miami Connection thing. Well, some guy finds a print on eBay, checks it out. This is great. Calls you up. You have a retail empire going in YK Kim, and you're like, this has to be a joke. Like, I made that movie when I was young. You guys can't be serious about this. It's like, oh no, we have an entire Alamo Draft House sold out of people enjoying your movie. That's kind of the status that this got.
And I think this was, I don't know what number film it was, but this guy made a bunch in the 80s. I think I caught one of them on Tubi, because it's another one it's not as ridiculous as Samurai Cop, but it's almost as ridiculous as Samurai Cop. And this was like the last of his series of films that he did. And I think this one, I guess, for all intents and I don't know why I'm laughing, but for all intents and purposes, this one broke him.
He retired after this.
Yeah.
Like, passed away in 2006, literally 1 year before the movie starts getting like acclaim. He like cult status acclaim, but still, nevertheless, right? Be kind of cool to be able to like live through the rediscovery, resurgence of the movie that, you kind of figure, again, you put your heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears into it. But now people are discovering this, but decades later, and you don't get to see it. But yeah, it seems like he'd made movies before, made movies in Iran. There's a pedigree there, like writer, director, producer, editor. He's made something. He made a lot of things.
If we still had video stores today, we'd probably have a section of these movies. I don't know what the genre would be. There are so many of them out there. And I've said this before on previous episodes where we've done Miami Connection or Action USA. It's like, you can't get enough of these movies. It's just something else to watch, like someone's insane vision go out like on a film reel that they fully intend to try and sell to somebody else. And it's so clear that they've shot it all in like one shot over a few days. There's no costume budget. Everyone's using the same guns.
Yes.
They're so lovable in their own way that they would be some sort of subgenre if we still did that today.
You would manage the shit out of that store. Absolutely. And you would be right by that end cap with Allen's recommends, and it would be right there. Action USA. You'd be pointing to all of them, be like, "You're gonna love this one."
I was just selling them to a friend of mine at work today. I'm telling him about the movie, and he's like, "Oh, is this like those other movies you told me about, you guys podcast?" And I was like, "Yep." And he goes, "I'll put it on a list. I'm gonna lock myself in my bedroom this weekend and take some shrooms and watch it."
That is a way to experience it.
That's another way.
Yep.
That's interesting too. You mentioned that, Alan, because like I think, let's see if you guys agree with this. Like the mileage on these movies can vary. When I used to work at Best Buy, I had two buddies, Chris and Dre, and we would always do like bad movie night, and we would almost make it a competition. We would go to a video store, each rent a movie. We would try to bring like the worst movie of the night. And that would be like an honor, right? To be like, hey, I brought up Jack Frost and Feeders and The Clown at Midnight, all available probably on Tubi right now, folks. So go check them out.
I want him dead. I want his head cut off and brought here. I want his head on this piano. Got that?
I will bring you his head and I will place it on your piano. I know the real samurai is here.
But like Alan, with that guy that you recommended the movie, the coworker, because I think with a lot of these, right, like it varies. If you don't get it, if you don't get like the amazingness of like a so bad it's good type of movie, then you stop it. It's ridiculous to some people, not us. We're talking about it. But like, I think for some people, it's like, no, this is not a good movie. Like, I'd rather actually go see Bad Boys. I'd rather go see Lethal Weapon. I want to see a good movie, not this. But there's also something that, for the right person, if you make the right recommendation and you share with them Action USA, it's a gift. Kind of like what you and Rebecca have been asking for, Alan. You're like, give us more.
Definitely is a certain personality. If you're a fan of films, seeing something put together in this way, in this sort of like slow moving car crash, you can't look away. To me, when I see them for the first time, I can't wait for the next scene. But then when I'm watching them for a second time, I'm paying more attention to the dialogue, if you can call it that. I'm paying more attention to the cinematography, if you can use that word in the same sentence with this film. I'm excited about how I'm going to see it a second time. It's almost an art form to be this bad. There are bad movies that you can't watch, right? Like you can't get through them. They try to be good, or they have all the right elements. They had big budgets, but these movies with like these $5,000 budgets with silliness throughout, it's almost an art form that comes together because I don't know. I mean, I guess I feel the passion coming from the person that made it, because you can't do this. You can't force people, drag actors and crew all the way through a nightmare like this to not have passion to finish. I mean, you have to like be begging people to come back.
The director was kind of making it up as he went along. Like he had a semblance of a script, but he would literally call the actors up the night before, meet me outside of the McDonald's parking lot. They would do the shooting of the scene. If there was a fight, he would give them like 20 minutes to choreograph the fight scene. From what I was reading, this guy's, hey, I got to go back. I got to develop the film so I can see what I'm missing. And then, hey guys, can you come back and film now? And it takes 4 months to film this. I need another scene. I need another pickup scene. Oh, these two things don't make sense. So the version of the movie we see, guys, is the version that he thought made the most sense.
Are you Fujiyama?
Yes, I am. Who are you?
I'm a cop.
I have thought about this quite a bit as to like how certain people appreciate this type of movie as opposed to like Bernie, what you were saying, like another type of movie watcher would put this on and probably would get like angry that you suggested watching it and be like, get this the fuck off the screen. I can't, what is this? But you nailed it, Alan. I think if you are certain, this might come across as being a little snobbish when I don't mean it to be, but I like what you were saying about being like a fan of movies and cinema. I think a movie like Samurai Cop is like, it's like beyond, like you're not even watching it for the story or for the plot, because for the life of me, I don't even know what the hell's going on in this movie. And I've seen it like 3 or 4 times, but it's irrelevant because watching it for, like, Alan, what you're saying, like, yeah, when the first time you watch it, what the hell's going to happen in the next scene? Like, what next line of dialogue is going to be uttered that is going to leave me either cackling hysterically or like scratching my head as like, what the hell is going on? That, I think, to me, is the joy of these movies, is that it's just like you almost watch it with like your jaw on the floor, because it's like, how does something like this exist? Because we grew up watching all those 80s movies, and we grew up watching like the blockbusters and like the Back to the Futures and Jaws and Close Encounters and all this stuff. And you see what incredible movie making looks like. The flip side of that, because these movies were being made at the same time as those great films, and it's like, well, this stuff exists too. It lives in a different universe, but it's a shared universe because it's all in front of us. And I think it takes a certain type of appreciation to not even just get through a movie like this, but to understand and appreciate it. And so it's always been a constant source of fascination to me. The fact that I love all these movies just unabashedly, like it's the process of it. How someone had this vision and actually got it up on the screen. It shouldn't exist by so many different measures. It should not exist in any way, shape, or form, but there it is. And not even that it was one person's vision, but you have to have the crew go along with it. You have to have the actors go along with it, especially in a case when they know, like, this script is a piece of shit. You want me to say what? But they're kind of tied into this whole ball of, like, movie making magic, because they're either just starting out or they want to have a bigger career. So, like, the idea of them just like walking off the set and be like, I can't do this. This is just fucking preposterous. Like, they can't bring themselves to do that. So they're on board for the months of shooting. And then if you're Matt Hannon, you come back months later and don a woman's wig to do pickup shots that end up comprising half of the movie. It's like, that's just like mind blowing in of itself.
Hello, sir. Joe.
Hey, Steve, how you doing? What's going on, Steve?
Not much, sir. There's a nurse in there giving him an injection.
Let's check it out.
It takes a certain level of guts to like make a movie like this, and you have a hospital scene which is clearly filmed inside of like a real estate office that might be abandoned. And then that same abandoned real estate office is the police station. It's so far out there. It's that sort of like just maniac desire to make the film that makes you go like, holy shit. Like, and to your point, Pete, to the actors who don't leave, like, you feel like in a movie like this or Action USA, even Miami Connection, they all kind of feel like they're being held hostage like we are watching it. It's like they're in it with you. They know exactly what you're going through watching the film because they had to live it. Holy shit. This is insane.
I was reading about the Matt Hansen, who then changed his name to Matthew Caritas. He grew to LA, guys, because he wanted to be a quote unquote John Candy style comedic actor. I'm guessing like when he says John Candy style comedic actor, but ends up becoming a bodyguard for Sylvester Stallone. I'm serious. And Sylvester Stallone says, hey man, you got to lose some weight, build some muscle, put yourself out there. He walks into this director's office, who gives him the role immediately. To your point, Alan, like, yeah, like these actors know what they're making. They've gone on a million auditions. They know what a budget for a movie is. They could probably tell, but the fact that they kept coming day in and day out, there's got to be something to this guy who's going to his friends and family. The script now, the locations are based on the people I know. And if I got like a buddy who works at like a Walmart and I need to shoot like a scene, I'm like, hey, you know how you work in the back in the unloading area? Can I sneak a few minutes to just do a shot of like, someone putting boxes by a dock warehouse area because I need that shot? Cool. Just sneak in, take that shot, do what you need.
Chances are, whatever scenes he's writing, he's probably writing them, Bernie, you're 100% right, with like locations that he lives in or knows in his mind.
There's so much of the dialogue revolves around the size of guys' dicks and,
your magical gift.
The gift.
Black gift. It's just...
Hey, take it easy, man. Come on. Talk to me. What do you want?
I can kill you now, or I can relieve you of this gift. This black gift.
Going back to the tropes, right? Like, it has all the stuff, the Maverick cop, the like by the book partner, the police supervisor who, puts the fist on the table. It's like, guys, you can't go rogue. You can't go Maverick. Yakuza, gang members, drug dealers, like stuff like I guess that's the other part that's like endearing about this film, is that as nuts as it is, it still plays it pretty close to the chest when it comes to like tropes. Like there's nothing that we would all be like, all right, that doesn't make sense. It's like, no, we saw this in all these other movies from the 80s.
Well, I mean, I love that the bad gang is called the Katana. And then, of course, you've got the immortal line of like, what's a katana? Japanese sword.
They call him Samurai. He speaks fluent Japanese.
Are you Fujiyama?
What does katana mean?
It means Japanese sword.
Again, there's just like that. It's like slightly off. There's something slightly off going on here. But you're right. I mean, it's clearly it's a product of someone that has seen all those movies, is not looking to do anything new. Lethal Weapon was successful. This was successful. I can do that. And so we're going to do something, and that'll be successful too, because, we're just going to kind of ape the formula, and the formula clearly works. So if we do something similar, and we've got this Japanese gang that's, again, don't ask me to describe the plot because I can't do it, but like they're, muscling on a territory, and there's cocaine stuff involved, and,
Right. I mean, we go right from that scene to this opening car chase, which is just so fucking awful. The Joe Marshall character is wearing a wig, right? So it's clearly a reshot scene, and they just keep using the same line. He's shoot him 7 times. That's one of the worst action sequences you'll ever see in your life.
Shoot him! You got him!
This is like the first big action set piece. So, normally you want to like really draw the audience in to be like, oh, you guys are in for a treat. Watch this. And then what you get on screen is like, I think maybe I made a mistake in watching this. But look, one of the things I love about that scene, and it's like a subtle thing, as Matt Hannon's driving during this chase, and they're chasing after the van, they're like firing at each other. He's yelling, to his partner, shoot, like 27 times. His hand is like barely on the steering wheel. Like he's driving so casually. And it's so subtle. And in the grand scheme of things, it means nothing. But when you just add it on, it's like an extra sprinkle on like the Jim Dandy friendly Sunday that is this movie.
It reminds me too of like when we all saw Action USA. And as ridiculous as that movie is, the stunts were insane. Like some of the stuff they pulled off, and the fact that it's basically just like a stuntman showcase, that made sense after watching that movie. Wait, this was made by stuntmen to showcase what they do. Okay, the movie didn't make sense before, but now it makes all the sense in the world. Versus this, where it's like there's no budget, there's no vehicles. That's the very enchanting part of this, is that still Amir Shavan persisted.
How about during that scene, you've got Peggy in the helicopter kind of flying like reconnaissance for them. And clearly they're just sitting in a stationary helicopter. Like it's not moving.
It's not even shaking.
They're not even still. Yeah, they don't even have like 2 crew members like shaking it to like give it the appearance that it's like flying. But then she's got to have like, like the sexual banter going on with Samurai Cop, where she's like, he's like, oh, don't worry. It's going to stay up. And he's like, you just keep it warm.
Good job, guys. Calls for a celebration.
You got it. I'll see you back at your place.
Who the hell talks like that? And what
did you notice too that the helicopter? So they were doing this thing where they had her stationary in a helicopter, but when they showed the helicopter in the air, I swear to God, it was like B-roll of like a news station helicopter like floating over a city.
Right.
This is the news at 7, right?
Exactly.
It is with traffic. It was the perfect setup for the totally necessary like sex scene that would follow at 10 minutes in.
With like the really like, the hands are not like curved around anyone's body parts. The hands are flat. It's almost like a carpenter, like just finished like cutting a 2x4. It was like just running their hand over to be like, ooh, smooth wood. Like that's like every sex scene.
Whoever was giving direction on the sex scenes it could have been someone in the range of like 10 to 11 to 12 years old who's like,
it's all Amir Shavan, Alan. It's all the one guy. It's all writer, producer, director, wig consultant, sex consultant. It's all him.
The women in his life must be pet a lot. They must be stroked when they're nude. Nothing else though. We don't do anything. We don't move. We just stroke. We touch the skin. We smooth it out. Put the lotion in.
Amir, what else do you want me to do? You've been rolling on this for a while. What else do you want me to do? Just keep going.
It never is there a humping motion, right? Like there's
like no erotic. There's nothing erotic about the scene. It's just people laying there naked.
This movie is amazing. Right, I love this movie.
And with all like the takes that go on too long, where people are like holding a pose or like turning to look in the camera, because you've got like men and women with like incredible bodies in this. It's not even like
everyone's attractive. Yeah,
yes,
very attractive people doing very unsexy things.
And then in the middle of all that, you get that Abbott and Costello routine with the restaurant waiter.
Oh, with the waiter. God, yeah.
What was that?
Who's that blonde girl? Oh, her name is Jennifer. She's the boss. The boss? You mean she owns this place? Her mother owns the place. Where's her father? Bang! Killed? Who shot him? He. Who? Him. Who's him? Himself. Oh, he committed suicide. Yes! Listen, when you see Jennifer alone, tell her I think she's very lovely. I'll do that. Tell her I'll try to see her soon. Good. I'll help you. Oh, yeah? Yeah. I like cops. My cousin's a cop. Oh, really? Where? In Costa Rica. Oh.
I did read that like he was an actor that I guess the director had used before in different movies. And, I guess that makes sense. But, hey, I'm just going to do the who's on first routine, but it's going to be...
It involves a suicide.
Yes. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense, but I love that scene. I love that.
So, Bernie, there was a line I wrote down from that scene that I wanted to throw at you guys. And I replayed it a few times because I had to actually hear what it was.
Okay.
At some point in the restaurant show, I'm going to call it the restaurant showdown because the whole scene lasts way too fucking long. If you do watch this thing like with a discerning eye, you start to realize that it's actually just like 5 long scenes that make up like the hour and 30 minutes. And this is one of the most grueling ones. It's like they wander in, they start talking shit back and forth with like the gang hanging at the table, and then there's this like random, young, beautiful blonde woman with them who doesn't make any sense. We haven't introduced her before. The waiter. Don't forget there's a whole fight afterwards where people get
in the parking,
at the parking lot.
Yep.
Which, who knows who's cleaning that shit up.
And don't forget, Alan, there's like the scene where randomly Samurai Cop at that table all of a sudden has like a monologue.
I'm telling these son of a bitches that we respect the Japanese of this country who are honest businessmen. And yeah, this is the land of opportunity for legitimate business, not for death merchants who distribute drugs to our children through schools and on the streets. Now I'm telling these motherfuckers that if they continue killing our children to make their precious millions that they deposit in their secret Swiss bank accounts. Counselor, before your lawsuit even gets off the court clerk's desk, I'll have their stinking bodies in garbage bags and ship them back to Japan for fertilizer.
He goes through this whole monologue about how like they're ripping off millions of dollars, and maybe Pete, this is the plot of why he's doing it, right? Is that whole thing? But then he like takes a breath and he looks at the blonde woman and he says, "What's an all-American girl like you doing with a geek like this?"
That's one of my favorite lines on the movie.
It stood out as like such a fantastic, like not only did he delivered it well, which was like totally out of character for him. He delivered it well, but it just didn't make any sense. And then he started getting creepy. It started like asking if people knew who she was and like just to let her know that he was Samurai Cop was interested. Can we get the fuck out of this restaurant? What are we still doing here? Talking to this waiter. And the waiter's like, "Don't worry, like I'll hook you up with her."
if the actual wait staff of that restaurant started showing up and like delivering like bread to the table, I would not have been surprised. Like, I'm surprised it wasn't like just business as usual going on while they're filming, and like the staff is just like, I don't know, these guys have been sitting at the table for a while. Just run over some bread to them. They look like they're getting hungry. But the other thing I love about that whole monologue that Samurai Cop gives is that, one, it's essentially like the big message line that is in Birdemic that the guy, like the ecologist guy in the forest gives.
That's right.
But like throughout the entire movie, Joe, Samurai Cop, his dialogue is usually relegated to like one or two sentences, and that's really it for the scene. And then this one, he just goes off for 2 minutes, talking about, this is the land of opportunity for legitimate business, not for deaf merchants who distribute drugs to our children through schools and the streets. And I'm telling these motherfuckers, like the way he's enunciating lines and just
that's pretty good line delivery there, Pete. That was like almost verbatim. Well done. Applause.
Well, I think you could probably run the actual clip if you wanted over it, but I try to bring a little something to the table.
You're on your way to San Diego, and I'll write the order.
Hey, Joe, just wait. Look, Captain, well, you know it, and they know it themselves. And what they want is results. And that's what we're going to give them. We're going to give them the results. Now, why don't we give Samurai here a second chance? Because I need him, we need him. So why don't we just help him and support him? All right?
Well, I guess, while we're on, because this movie is so quotable, yes. And we've covered a lot of them, other than I think, the main one with the doctor or nurse or whoever she was. Like, do you have any other favorite lines, either of you, from this movie?
So Samurai Cop is trying to leave the restaurant again later in the movie, and they run into a few thugs. It's a club, but it's supposed to be the same restaurant, and at some point he runs out through the front. One of the henchmen has a great line. He has a baseball bat in his hands, and he walks up after Samurai Cop just disposed of the guy with the gun, and he's like, "Stay back! This guy is mine!" And he starts doing like the rhythmic movements with the bat that you would see like one of your friends do in high school, maybe with some nunchucks or something. "Stay back! This guy is mine!" And then the bat twirling. That really made me smile today. It was just like this movie is so full of heart. It really is.
I mean, I guess we got to talk about, before we wrap this one up, we got to talk about the scene with the nurse. Because, I mean, that's like you mentioned it, Bernie. This is what kickstarted this whole movie's cult explosion.
Absolutely.
Bingo.
Do you like what you see?
I love what I see.
Would you like to touch what you see?
Yes, I would.
Would you like to go out with me?
Yes, I would.
Would you like to fuck me?
Bingo.
Well, then let's see what you've got. Doesn't interest me. Nothing there.
Nothing there? Just exactly what would interest you? Something the size of a jumbo jet?
Have you been circumcised?
Yeah, I have. Why?
Well, your doctor must have cut a big portion of it off.
No, he was a good doctor.
Good doctors make mistakes, too. That's why they buy insurance.
Hey, don't worry. I got enough. It's big.
I want bigger.
It is a gem of cinematic history. Like, this whole scene, Samurai Cop is just... There is no female that can enter a scene that he isn't just down to fuck and then is just, like, not even shy. He's putting it out there. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter where you've been, what your job is, whether you're good, bad, indifferent.
This particular nurse is like, let's face it, she's clearly given a few sponge baths in her time. Most of her lines, she has 7 lines, 6 of them allude to the fact that she wants to know if he's got a nice dick or if it's, regular like everybody else's. He kind of let it roll off his back. He's like, "Oh, fuck it, I'll just go stick it in Peggy again." But it's like, poor Peggy. But her dismissal of him is the absolute best part of this movie.
Well, and in a movie that's really not kind to its female characters, like it's odd that this is like the one scene where like the woman whatever, fuck off. You're not big enough for me, and just leaves. It's even just still like the dialogue, like the whole exchange is just, it's wild. It's a masterclass of like someone's idea of what this kind of banter would be like if this ever happened in real life.
I feel like somebody stuck a big club up my ass, and it hurts. We've got to figure out a way to get it out of there.
There's just no end to the shamelessness in this movie, and I mean, it right to actually there is no end because it right up to the end where Zadar's character decides that the honorable thing to do is to fight Joe. I just thought it was a perfect ending to have, you know, like the head bad guy go at him one-on-one and lose in some strange fashion where his neck may have been broken, but then it wasn't.
Well, I'm going to let him commit ritual suicide because, you know, it's honor.
Well, it does make sense because, you know, Joe was trained by Japanese masters. I think that becomes very clear throughout this movie.
That's right. Absolutely.
His command of Japanese and Japanese culture is on display, you know, really in every scene. He's that good.
By the way, what's an all-American girl like you doing with a geek like this?
Last question I have for you guys, because I feel like after watching all of these movies, there has to be a shared universe here. William Hubbard, who played McKinnon in Action USA, I have to think him and Fraser are actually brothers in a universe that we don't know about. Hubbard is the guy who was the FBI agent, and you have Fraser, who is like maybe his younger brother who is out in L.A., just saying, Samurai Cop, Action USA, same world.
So you and I share the same brain because I had this exact same question queued up of like, I want to believe in some way, shape, or form that Action USA and Samurai Cop share the same world. And if you'd told me that Drago was like in a car chase in one of the scenes, you know, in this movie, I either A, would believe it, would want to believe it, or I would like to go back in and digitally insert him into this movie so that it becomes a reality.
Drago was hired by the Katana at one point for something. We all know that.
I mean, there's no doubt that this is the sequel to Action USA. Samurai Cop is the Lethal Weapon 2 to Action USA's Lethal Weapon 1. As for, you know, Frank Washington and the other fellow there, I think that Michael Bay isn't doing much right now, and
maybe they're the dads of Will Smith and Lawrence. I also have to imagine too that like maybe in this shared universe, Dragon Force is on tour. They're going to LA and they encounter the same ninja gang that happens to actually be the Katana. So that's where Miami Connection is also in the shared universe. And at the same time, the New York Ninja, who is maybe in California, meeting his brother. You know, he's still mourning after the loss of his wife, but, you know, he's still rollerblading around now, but in the streets of L.A. I just want to see that one movie where they all come together like Avengers Endgame. That's the movie we all want.
And there's a scene where during like the climactic action chase, they crash into a house and smash a bunch of solar panels, and Rod and Natalie from Birdemic come walking out like, what the fuck's going on here? So, you know, I mentioned earlier to our listeners, like what differentiates this episode from the 53 other Samurai Cop episodes that you could find. I think we just nailed it, because we are throwing down the gauntlet that we would like some filmmaker or even aspiring filmmaker to get in touch with all living actors and actresses in all of these movies, bring the universe together, and let's just make one big fucking explosion of just earnest awfulness. R.I.P. Robert Zadar. Let's just give everyone the most amazing experience of seeing all of this come together in one universe. I've got a couple of quick rapid fire questions for you guys. Number one, do you prefer wig Samurai Cop Joe or natural hair Samurai Cop Joe?
I'm going to go with wig cop, because there's something ridiculous about a man who has a wig and yet doesn't know how to wear a hat. Good, Alan?
I prefer him with the flowing locks.
Ooh,
hair. As
natural lock.
Follically challenged, I I admire a good head of hair. I also don't have any respect for someone with that much beautiful hair that is wearing a fucking wig.
Okay, where do you put Samurai Cop in the pantheon of action heroes? Like, does he fall above or below Jack Burton and John McClane?
You know, I think his moves are, you know, on par with like John McClane if he had, you know, sudden onset diarrhea and he was clenching his butt cheeks while fighting. I'm just, you know, I think he's just a couple rungs below our beloved heroes of the past. He might just be above the boob from America USA who played the Riggs character. Yes, and then there's like 100 feet, and then there's John McClane.
You know, I would probably say he's like Red Box Steven Seagal. Kind of an insult to Redbox, not Steven Seagal I could give a shit about, but Redbox, sorry, if your people are listening, you know, I appreciate everything you've done. If there's a Mount Rushmore, he's not in the state where the Mount Rushmore is located, Pete. Yes, I think you're giving him a bit more credit, though, aren't you, Pete?
Well, I mean, you know, I'm just curious where you would rank him because, you know, he's an iconic figure now, and, you know, for all the Michael Dudikoffs, there are a few Michael Dudikons, and, you know, it depends on which way you want to flip the switch. All right, final thing that I've got, the bad guy, not Robert...
Wait, now you brought that up, Pete. Wait, did you think this guy, his name's Joe, right, in the movie?
Yep.
Well, so is Michael Dudikoff. His name is Joe in the American Ninja movie, so did they train at, like, the same island in the Philippines by the same master? And, like, they were two American orphans, like, probably sons of GIs or something, you know, after Vietnam. And one guy goes into the military, Michael Dudikoff. The other Joe ends up going to California to become a cop. Just saying, maybe the shared universe just got bigger.
There's a difference between a cop and a samurai cop.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe they had a difference in agreement over ninja and samurai and what path they wanted to take.
Ninja, samurai, all American.
Okay, we'll wrap it up with this. The bad guy that's not Robert Zadar, his character name is Fuji Fujiyama. Is Fuji Fujiyama, is that like, you know, Steve Stevenson or like, you know, Bill Williams? Like, what is that? Is that one of those, like...
I grew up with a friend. His name was David Davis, and we all tried to figure out why. Like, why would you do that to a kid? How do you end up with, you know, and then his nickname became Ass Kravis. So, just because it went together. When you're a Dave Davis, it's much like a Fuji Fujiyama. It's a long, arduous life of just people being like, really? Is that really your name? Because people do think you're fucking with them when you have the same first name and last name.
I just don't know how you could be taken seriously as, like, a Yakuza leader with a name like that. I feel like he should have endeavored to come up with, like, you know, maybe a badass one word name or something like that. Even if it's just Fuji, just be like, God, call me Mr. Fuji. You could be like, you know, the 80s wrestler, Mr. Fuji.
There you go.